Hello and welcome to What's That Behind You. I don't know what it is about the UK, but we seem to house a lot of the most haunted homes. And this one is no different. I would like to say thank you to Malden Boy 1 in the last video's comments for bringing this one to my light. If you would like a story covered, please leave it down in the comments. But today's video looks at supposedly one of the most haunted houses here in the UK, Borley Rectory. Borley Rectory in Essex was first built back in 1863 on the site of an old monastery. The reports of strange occurrences date back to the mid-1800s. However, the first documented evidence of paranormal activity was in the early 1900s. The rectory itself was severely damaged by fire in 1939. But any old house with an unpleasant atmosphere, especially isolated, damp, dark, and unmodernized, was once described as to be like Borley Rectory. Judging by this long story of a ghost story, the place showed its true nature from the beginning. Many of the incumbent rectors, their families, servants and guests heard and felt ghosts. Always malevolent, crockery flew about and hit people. Candlesticks tumbled down the stairs. There were whisperings, cries, thumps and bumps. Just the usual for your average haunted home. The first reports that came to public attention were from 1928, when the then owner Guy Eric Smith and his wife contacted the Daily Mirror newspaper to report the strange going on. The newspaper then took on the help of a paranormal investigator known as Harry Price. Mr. Price stayed at the house to carry out extensive research for more than a year. Whilst staying there, Price witnessed the reported poltergeist phenomena. He was said to have got in touch with the spirit of a past tenant, Reverend Harry Bull, who had died there years before. After numerous attempts at exorcising the property and continued media intrusion, in 1930, Mr. and Mrs. Smith left the house for good. The following residents of the house were Reverend Foyster and his wife Mary Ann. They both were to continue to experience all the same phenomena that Price and the Smiths had witnessed before them. However, the poltergeist activity seemed to get more aggressive, with reports of smashed glasses, broken windows, and Mary Ann being thrown from her bed by an unseen force. The couple were to also experience otherworldly messages on the wall, which defied any logical reason like other reports. After 5 years of what must have been a very frightening time indeed, the Foysters left the house, leaving Price to move in and continue his study without interference. However, during his stay, he and his team of researchers were left relatively disappointed, as they witnessed very little compared to what had been seen before. A complete account of what Price experienced was published in a book, The Most Haunted House in England. Even after the house was burnt to the ground, reports continued to emerge. The most recent reports occurred in the parish church. Mr. Prince died in 1948, and since then many skeptics have dissected his work, explaining all sound phenomena and other phenomena as misinterpreted natural occurrences. Believe what you will, but all reports stretching over 100 years seem to cement its place as one of the most haunted houses in Britain, and maybe even the world. So what of the ghosts and ghouls of Borley Rectory? For a house labelled as the most haunted house in England, it is little wonder that there's no shortage of ghostly experiences. One of the earliest sightings, and perhaps most famous of all, is that of a nun This may seem strange given that there used to be a monastery on site. One would expect a monk rather than a nun. According to local folklore, a nun from a nearby nunnery fell in love with a monk from the monastery, and the pair attempted to elope together. They were found and sentenced to death. The monk was reported to have been sent to the gallows in the monastery, whilst the nun was sealed in the walls of the nunnery alive. This nun is believed to be the one that is seen on the grounds of Borley Rectory, looking for the monk in the hope of running away together once more. The nun has been seen and heard several times throughout the years. She seemed to be most active during the time in which Reverend Harry Bull lived there. The next most significant report comes from Eric Smith and his wife. They reported mysterious footsteps, doorbells ringing of their own accord, and poltergeist activity, which occurred numerous times. One of Borley's least explicable disturbances was the ringing of house bells, which summoned servants to various rooms, not only when nobody would admit having pulled them, but when the wires operating the old-fashioned intercom system had been disabled. And what about objects taking off across rooms in plain sight, or pictures hung on strong cords suddenly crashing down? Poltergeist activity has long been linked to hysteria, inevitably, as the word implies, of female origin, and teenagers with raging hormones and confused psyches have been blamed for somehow acquiring the ability to propel objects, lift carpets, and even make beds fly. Talking of those teenagers, one of the stories to come out of the rectories was from a teenager. Russell Old was just 17 when he stepped foot onto the haunted grounds of Borley Rectory. He had no idea of the things he would witness on that day 20 plus years ago, and how it would impact the rest of his life. As Russell stood on the grounds of the most haunted house in England, in the rural village of Borley, northwest Colchester, it was on that cold day at the beginning of the century that Russell spotted the figure of a young boy. It all started one day when my uncle asked if I'd ever heard of Borley Rectory, the most haunted place in England. We went up there for the day and I brought a couple of friends. As we were driving down the road, you could just feel your arm hairs stick up. I knew I was near it. We drove up to the church and there was a little turn where you can sit in front of it. I just remember turning my head and looking towards it and seeing a little boy. He added, I can remember it so well. The little boy looked Victorian. He was wearing this tweed jacket and I could see it so clearly. I looked to my uncle and I said, "Can we go? I don't want to be here." And they had no idea of what I had just seen. I said, "Did you not see it?" As you can tell, over the years the rectory has been a hive of activity, and many of the visitors to the grounds have shared the same unnerving feelings. From the small amount of stories from the history of Borley I have shared with you, surely you can see that this is one of the truly most haunted places, at least here in the UK. But what do you think? Would you visit the grounds? I want to say thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you have enjoyed it, please consider leaving a like, and possibly subscribing for more videos just like this one. But until the next time, whether you're walking through the grounds or searching for the nun, you don't have to be afraid of what's behind you.